Hey YouTube, Wayne's Fish Tanks 99 here, back at it for another video. On this week's video, I'm going to be going over the basics on how to set up an aquarium. I'm mainly going to go over freshwater aquariums because that's what I keep, but I'll also kind of go into a little bit of detail on saltwater aquariums as well. So the first step that you're going to be doing when setting up a new aquarium is, of course, you want to identify whether you want saltwater or freshwater. They're both obviously very different tanks that you're going to have. So once you decide what you want, then you're going to decide on what kind of fish that you want. Now, when you are picking up fish, that's going to determine on tank size that you need. So obviously, if you're going to get smaller fish like tetras or something like that, you're gonna be able to fit them into a smaller tank. So you might only need a 10 to 20 gallon tank. Whereas if you're gonna keep Oscars or cichlids or something like that, you're probably gonna need a bigger, like 30, 40, 50 gallon tank. And if you're gonna keep anything bigger, you're definitely gonna need a bigger tank. So always do your research with what size tanks your fish need. It's also going to come into play on the amount of fish you want to keep. So obviously if you want just one Oscar, you're not going to need as big of a tank as if you wanted 6 Oscars, or if you want 200 tiger barbs, or if you want a whole bunch of fish. Obviously you're going to need a bigger tank, so you want to keep that in mind. You're also going to want to keep in mind compatibility. So obviously not all fish will interact well together. So obviously you can't keep male betas with other male betas or with other fish, because they will fight and harm each other or even kill each other. As well as other fish just don't really get along. There's a lot of fish that you can only keep with like fish, you can't keep with other fish. And then you're also going to have to identify how difficult it is to keep the fish. So there's fish such as tetras that are more hardy fish that maybe if you're a new fish keeper, you might tend to make a mistake or something like that. So they're more hardy and they're more able to adapt to, say, maybe not so perfect water parameters, whereas other fish are a lot more sensitive and delicate. So if you make a mistake, the chance of them surviving is not very high. So you want to keep that in mind too. Then you're going to move on to the tank and equipment. So obviously once you've selected your fish, you know what size of tank you need to keep the fish in. So you're going to want to purchase your tank, and then you're going to want to purchase the equipment for your tank. So the basic 2 pieces of equipment I would say for freshwater tanks are going to be filtration and then heat. So obviously you need those two to have a balanced tank. So for filtration, there's lots of filters. There's like in my 50 gallon, I have sponge filters. There's hang on the back filters. There's under gravel filters. There's internal, like in the tank filters, and all those are. It's pretty much what you prefer. I prefer hang on the back filter. Or canister filters, that's another kind. Those are probably my 2 favorite. I just use the sponge filter for my 50 just because I've never used sponge filters before, so it's just more of an experiment. But I probably at some point will switch to a canister filter or a couple hang on the back filters. And with those, you want to keep in mind also how big your tank is. So obviously you can't get a filter that's only big enough to filter a 20 gallon tank if you have a 70 gallon tank. So you have to, it's always better to have a filter that's too big, that's not going to need to work at full capacity, rather than having something too small. So if you have a filter that's good for 120 gallons and you only have it on a 65 or a 55, it's not going to cause any detriment to your tank. If anything, it's going to be better for it, because it's going to be able to filter the tank water more often and make the water parameters better. Then next you're going to need to pick up substrate. So you're going to have to decide what kind of substrate you want, if you want sand, or if you want gravel, or if you want, say you want to do a dirted tank and you want to put dirt under your gravel, or anything like that, or if you want eco-complete substrate, which I have on my beta tank, anything like that. And then usually with those you want to cap it off with gravel on top or something like that, just so it doesn't all leak into the water, so it all kind of keeps compressed. After that, you want to go and identify what decor or plants you want. So there's plastic plants, there's plastic decorations, there's real driftwood. You can have a bare bottom tank. You don't need anything in your tank. It all depends on what your preference is. And then after that, you're going to also have to decide on if you're doing a saltwater tank. Obviously, it's going to be more expensive for equipment. So there's protein skimmers that you're going to need. You could go into a sump, you could go into pumps, RODI units, everything like that. So it's going to be a lot more expensive to do a proper saltwater tank than it is to do a freshwater tank. So that's just something to keep in mind. After that, the next step is going to be cycling your tank. And first thing obviously you have to do is fill it up with water. So after you fill it with water, that's when, before you add any fish, you have to start to cycle the tank. There's many different ways of cycling a tank. You can cycle a tank with hardy fish. So by adding some hardy fish into the tank, it's going to, obviously when they poop, it's going to start producing bacteria, and then eventually your tank's going to make bacteria to eat the other bacteria, the fish waste and all that stuff. So I'll make a video about the nitrogen cycle, or the nitrogen cycle in the tanks a little bit later on, just so everybody understands it. But really, all that you're going to want is to build enough bacteria that it's going to eat your fish waste that's going to be produced in the tank. So the cycling process takes anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, but it could even take longer than that. Usually, the way I like to cycle my tank is either bottled media. So you can go to your local fish store and they'll have, in a bottle, it'll be, it just has a whole bunch of nitrifying bacteria in it. So you just pour that into your tank, wait a couple days. Sometimes it doesn't even take very long. You test out your tank water and see how the water parameters come back. If the nitrites and nitrates and everything like that is in check, then you can start adding fish. So I like to do that, or adding filter media from another tank that's already established. I find that works the best. So if you have a hang on the back filter or a canister filter, add that stuff to your filter that you're have in your new tank. I know adding dirty media, obviously you're going to think, oh, it's just going to make my tank dirty. But that you want the bacteria to go into your tank and into your filter, so that way it starts the cycling process. So after you're done that, you're going to want to add your fish after everything's done. So after you've tested your tank water and everything comes back perfect, then you can start adding fish. I wouldn't recommend adding all your fish at once because you're going to overload your tank. So you really only have enough nitrifying bacteria for a couple fish to start off with, and then it's going to slowly start to build up where you add more and more fish. So obviously when I started my 50-gallon, I started adding my two, I think they're tetras, and then the rainbow shark. So I started with those two, and then after that, then I went a couple weeks later, added my Australian rainbow fish. Then a couple weeks after that, I added panda cory catfish. So you pretty much have to wait until your bacteria keeps building up and is able to eliminate all the waste. And then you also want to incorporate different types of fish. So bottom feeders or snails is always a good idea to have. So obviously, if all you have is fish that don't clean up waste, then you're going to need to do water changes more frequently. You're going to have to be more thorough. There's going to be more waste. So that's kind of why I enjoy having the bottom feeders as well as lots of snails. So I have snails in my tank as well. They're just little, just normal snails that come. I don't really know how I got them, but they're part of the bacteria, and they come from your local fish store. If you have plants or anything, they'll be on the tank, or they'll be on the plants and they'll incorporate into your tank. As well as the bottom feeders, they'll eat all the poop that sinks down to the bottom. So that way, I mean, obviously they'll poop out stuff too, but it just kind of lowers the amount of waste that's in your tank. So your filters don't need to work as hard. So after you're done that, every time you keep adding fish, I would recommend quarantining your fish. So what I did is I had a 20 or 30 gallon bare bottom tank that was cycled. All the water parameters were good. When I bought the fish from my pet store, I would put them into that quarantine tank for 3 to 4 weeks and just observe the fish. After I observed the fish, you're kind of looking for if they have any ick, or if they have, I know my rainbows had cottonmouth, so the lips of the fish would start to kind of break down, and you could see the skin was kind of coming off. So you have to treat the fish in the quarantine tank, rather than if you add them all into your already established tank, it's going to spread throughout all the fish that you have. So I didn't want that. So usually stuff comes out within the first couple weeks, and then you can treat it, and then when you add the fish into the tank, you're not going to have many problems like that. Obviously something can still arise, but you're going to obviously want to treat the fish first, and this way it kind of eliminates something from happening. It kind of, well, maybe not eliminates, but it's going to lower the chances of something from happening. And then after you've added all your fish, and even if you're still adding fish, the most important thing you're going to need to do is water changes and equipment maintenance. So I would recommend doing a 30 to 40% water change once a week. And what I like to do is once a month do about a 70 to 80% water change, just to put fresh water in your tank. So the purpose of water changes is if you're using a python or a siphon, you're going to get a lot of the waste that's on the bottom of the tank as well when you're doing water changes. So you're going to go all the way around the bottom of the tank, go like under your decor, all around there, and you're going to pick up waste and fish poop, and it's going to be siphoned into a bucket. And that bucket you're going to either flush down your toilet, down your sink, or I just throw mine outside on the grass. So you're going to do that to eliminate waste out of the water. And then by doing that, it just helps improve your water parameters. So yeah, so I would recommend doing that. But one thing you're not going to want to do is do a big water change and then clean both of your, or all of your filter media. So I would recommend only cleaning half of your filter media, because if you clean all of it and do a massive water change, it's going to be very, you're going to have hardly any nitrifying bacteria left in your tank. So you're going to almost have to restart the cycling process, and a lot of your fish could die because there's no bacteria to break down all of the waste. So that's something you really want to keep in mind, is maybe 1 week do a small water change and clean half of your filter media, and then the next week maybe do a little bit of a bigger water change and then clean your other half of your media. You don't want to do it all at once, because that's going to be really bad for your tank. So that's pretty much the basics of how to set up an aquarium. I mostly just did freshwater tanks because that's what I keep. So if you guys have any questions about setting up a tank, feel free to ask me, leave it in the comments section below. And as always, if you guys like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And always a like is appreciated. So if we could get, let's say 15 likes on the video, that'd be great. So yeah, so I will see you guys next week, and yeah, thanks guys for watching. Bye-bye.